The wind rolled off the sea like a sigh, brushing across the tiled terrace of my villa as if nature itself had come to pay respect. I watched the waves crash, steady and endless, just like the weight of memory that sat on my shoulders. I'm 72 now. My knees ache in the cold, and my hands aren't as steady as they used to be. But my mind, sharp as ever. The truth is, I wasn't always a man with a villa on the Amalfi Coast and a bank account deep enough to make grown men sweat. I was once just Harold Ellison, retired carpenter, widower, and, most painfully, a father whose own son had treated him like trash tossed out on garbage day. But we'll get there. It all started the day my house burned down. Not in some dramatic Hollywood blaze, mind you. Just a short circuit in the ancient heater that hadn't been serviced in years. I should have known better. Should have had it replaced. But back then, I was scraping by on Social Security and odd jobs fixing fence posts for neighbors who barely remembered my name. The fire took everything. Photographs of Margaret, my late wife. Her journals. My tools. My life. When the fire crew left and the smoke had cleared, I called my son Matthew. I still remember how cold the phone felt in my hand. Like it knew what was coming. "Dad?" He answered, his voice brisk, clipped. "Always too busy." "There's been a fire," I said. "The house is gone." Silence. "Then, you didn't have insurance?" I could have lied. I wanted to. But I was too damn tired. No. Two couldn't afford it anymore. Another pause. Then laughter. Not amused laughter. The kind that comes with a scoff, coated in disbelief. "Jesus, Dad. You're unbelievable." That was it. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Where are you staying tonight?" Just judgment, served hot and bitter. He didn't offer help. Not even a spare room. His wife, Cynthia, always looked at me like I was a stray dog dragging fleas into her clean white carpet. And well, Matthew had always been embarrassed by me. I could see it in the way he introduced me at parties. "This is my dad. He built houses. Retired now." As if he wanted to tack on. "Don't worry, he won't be here long." After the fire, I slept in my old Dodge for a few days. Then in a shelter. Then I disappeared. At least to them. But life has a funny way of rewarding the patient. It was at the shelter I met Carmine, a quiet Italian man with a voice like sandpaper and eyes that had seen too much. He was old, older than me even, but sharp. Said he'd owned dozens of properties in Italy before he moved to the States. Said he was looking for someone to help him fix up a small house. He still had overseas a project to pass time. Nothing fancy. "I need hands," he told me. "Not soft ones. Old ones. Ones that remember nails and dust." I had nothing to lose. So I went. We flew out a week later. The house was a wreck. Vines strangled the walls, windows were broken, and the roof sagged like a spine bowed from grief. But I knew how to fix it. When the repairs were done, he handed me a key. "It's yours," he said. "What?" I blinked at him. "What do you mean?" "I signed it over last week. You brought it back to life. You earned it." I tried to refuse. Honestly, I did. But he just waved me off. "Don't waste breath. You saved it. Now let it save you." That house became my sanctuary. I sold it 2 years later, a German couple in love with sea breezes and lemon trees, and used the money to buy a crumbling villa further up the coast. I restored that one too. And then another. Word spread. Old expats and rich tourists wanted homes with history, and I was the man who could give it to them. Before long, I had 3 villas, a modest business, and more peace than I'd ever known. I never reached out to Matthew. He didn't know where I'd gone. Didn't seem to care. Until last week. I was out on the terrace, sipping coffee, watching the sea gnaw at the cliffs like it had forever to win. Then the phone rang. An unfamiliar number, but I answered. "Dad." My heart stuttered. "Matthew," I said flatly. A pause. Then, "Too heard you were in Italy. I got your number from Uncle Pete." I waited. He cleared his throat. "Cynthia and I, we're going through a rough patch. We've been looking for a place to set. She saw pictures of your villa. Said it's perfect." I leaned back in my chair, let the salt air fill my lungs. "What are you asking, Matthew?" "Well, we were wondering if maybe you'd let us stay for a while. Just to sort things out. It'd mean a lot." I almost laughed. "But instead," I said, "when I lost my house, you laughed. That was years ago. You didn't offer me a couch. Not even a damn blanket." He went quiet. Now here he is, all grown up and desperate, wanting a slice of the life he never believed I could build. And part of me, the bitter part, wanted to slam the door shut in his face. But another part of me remembered Margaret. Her voice, soft and strong. Harold, don't become what hurt you. So I said, come. Stay a week. But it's not yours, Matthew. Not this time. He arrived 2 days later. Cynthia in tow, sunglasses too large for her face, lips tight with resentment. They walked through my home like it was a museum, admiring the arches, the stone, the views, as if their praise could buy forgiveness. On the third night, over dinner, he finally asked, "You ever think about what'll happen to this place after you're gone?" I chewed slowly, eyes on the wine in my glass. "You mean, am I leaving it to you?" He gave a sheepish shrug. "Well, yeah." Cynthia placed her hand over his, all fake sweetness and silent calculation. I looked at them both, then smiled. "I've already written my will." They waited. "It's going to someone who believed in me when I had nothing. Someone who didn't laugh when I fell." And just like that, the silence grew thick, heavy, full of everything they didn't say when I needed them most. I excused myself, left them at the table. "Tomorrow, I'll take them to the airport. And when they ask why I didn't leave it to family, I'll tell them, family is more than blood. Family is who lifts you when you're broken, not who waits to feast when you heal." The morning after that dinner, I sat on the same terrace where I'd rebuilt my life, a place where the breeze always tasted like lemons and salt. Below, the courtyard echoed with the sounds of wheels on stone. Matthew was dragging their matching suitcases, expensive, polished, and completely out of place here. He hadn't spoken a word to me since last night. I didn't mind. Cynthia came to say goodbye. Her voice was honeyed, but her eyes had none of it. "Thank you for your hospitality," she said, with a little smile that didn't reach her cheeks. I nodded. "Safe flight." She lingered, like she wanted to say more, then turned and disappeared into the car. Matthew came up a few minutes later. He looked older than when I'd last seen him, not in the hair or the skin, but in the soul. Something had hollowed him out. Maybe ambition, maybe regret, maybe both. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You can try. Why didn't you ever call? After the fire. After I said what I said." I turned to face him. What would have been the point? "I was angry," he said quickly, like if he could say it fast enough, it might undo something. "We were tight on money too. Cynthia was pressuring me." I panicked. I studied him. The man who had once been my little boy, all knees and laughter, sitting in the garage while I sanded wood. "You were embarrassed by me." "I was stupid," he admitted. I raised an eyebrow. "Not the same thing." His shoulders slumped. I thought you'd always be small. Like that life was all you were ever going to be. I didn't think you'd grow." I gave a short laugh. "I wasn't the one who stopped growing, son." He stared at the floor, his face red. And for a moment, I saw a boy inside the man, lost and desperate for approval. "I wanted to fix it," he said, voice small. "Thought maybe if we stayed here, we could reconnect." "You wanted the villa," I replied. "That's not the same thing as wanting me." He looked up, eyes glassy now. "I'm sorry." I didn't say anything. I just placed a hand on his shoulder. Not with warmth. Not with forgiveness. Just enough to say, "This is the end of this chapter." He nodded, understanding that was all he was going to get. They left, and the house was quiet again. But not empty. 2 weeks later, I walked through town and ran into Luca Carmine's grandson. He was in his 30s now, sharp-dressed but kind-eyed, carrying his daughter on his shoulders. "Harold," he said, grinning wide. "Still building miracles?" "Only the quiet ones," I replied, shaking his hand. "You hear about the city's new project?" he asked. "Restoring the old monastery. They need someone with taste. Someone who doesn't ruin history." "Sounds like a nightmare," I said, but smiled anyway. He laughed. "I told them I knew a man." I paused, then said, "Let's talk over lunch." That's how it always started, with someone who believed. Over the next year, I poured myself into the monastery. The cracks in its walls reminded me of my own, the kind only time and care could seal. I supervised every stone placed, every iron bolt reforged. Young workers came from across the region, hungry to learn. I taught them what no blueprint could, how to build with soul. And I didn't just restore the monastery, I filled it. We hosted music, poetry, food for the poor. It became the heartbeat of a quiet village most of the world had forgotten. I never heard from Matthew again. But one day, I got a letter. It was handwritten, simple. "Dad, Cynthia left. Took everything. I sold the house. I've been thinking about you. About how you started over. I've been volunteering at a community shelter. I just wanted you to know. Matt. I stared at the note for a long time. Then I folded it and placed it in a drawer beside a photograph of Margaret. Her smile hadn't faded with the years. One spring morning, I walked into the village square and saw a man with an old leather satchel waiting by the fountain. He looked nervous, out of place. He turned. It was Matthew. Thinner. A little grayer. But him. Thought I'd try Italy, he said. Not just the villa. The real Italy. I nodded. Found a small flat in town, he continued. Needs work. I don't know where to start. I looked at his hands. Calloused. Not from typing or shaking hands in boardrooms, but from real work. He held out the satchel. I brought tools. That was the moment. No begging. No entitlement. Just a mammy, son coming to build something with his own hands. I reached into my pocket, pulled out an old pencil. The one I used to mark wood with when he was a boy. Then let's measure twice, I said, smiling. He laughed. We walked. The villa is still mine. It will be, until the day I die. But what I leave behind won't be marble columns or a beachfront terrace. It'll be that moment. The look in his eyes. The weight of legacy finally shifting from inheritance to understanding. Matthew stayed. Not in my villa. He rented a modest apartment above the bakery where the old widow, Signora Bellotti, sold pastries so sweet they could cure a broken heart. The place smelled of almond flour and grief, and I knew it was the right kind of place for someone trying to rebuild. He came by every few days, sometimes just to ask about tools, sometimes to sit in silence. One morning, he brought coffee and a notebook. A real one, leather-bound, with drawings in the margins and numbers scrawled across the pages. I've been working on a plan, he said. For what? For building something of my own. Maybe a guest house. Maybe a school. I sipped my espresso. Why? He looked up at me, and for the first time in decades, his eyes didn't look for approval. They looked for direction. Because I've lived my whole life trying to be big. Bigger than you. Bigger than failure. But now I think, I just want to build something good. That was the first thing he ever said to me that sounded like a man, not a son. I nodded. Show me. So he did. For weeks, we walked through old lots outside the village. One of them had an olive tree growing through the roof of what had once been a goat shed. He laughed when he saw it. I want this one, he said. Even the tree. You're serious? He touched the bark. Yeah. It broke through something, didn't it? That means it wants to live. I laughed. Then let's make it a home. We started with our hands. No contractors. Just me and Matthew. And on some days, Luca would join. His daughter, too barefoot, curious, and always sticky from jam. She called me Nano Harold, even though I wasn't her grandfather. But I liked the sound of it. One night, after we finished framing the first room, we sat in the dirt, sharing cheap wine and sausage from the butcher. Matthew looked at me, drunk in that honest way wine allows, and asked, Do you hate me? The question didn't surprise me. I stared into the fire. No, but I did. He nodded, as if that was fair. I added, Not because you left me behind, but because you thought I was only worth something when I had nothing. I was young, he said. No, I said. You were scared. There's a difference. He looked away, eyes glassy again. I continued. You thought if you aligned yourself with people who were already winning, you'd never have to admit you were scared to lose. And well, I was the biggest loser you knew. He didn't deny it, but he whispered, I was wrong. Yeah, I said, but you're not the first. The wind picked up, brushing the fire into gold ribbons. I looked at my son, this flawed, broken, trying man, and I realized something. I didn't want him to carry the weight of his mistakes forever. That wasn't love. That was vengeance. And I wasn't that man anymore. I forgave you a long time ago, I said softly. He looked at me, mouth parted like he didn't believe it. But, I added, you don't need forgiveness to keep building with me. You just need to keep showing up. He smiled. Small, grateful, real. The house took shape over the summer. Not just the structure wood, nails, mortar, but the dream. He designed the upstairs with a row of tiny balconies. For the artists, he said. The ones who can't afford galleries. And then he told me what he really wanted. A space for people like me, he said. People who wasted time chasing the wrong things. People who want to restart, even when they think it's too late. He wanted to call it Casa Nuova, the new house. But it wasn't about the house. It was about who we become when we admit we were wrong and still choose to build. At night, I'd walk through the unfinished rooms, brushing my fingers across the raw walls, feeling the pulse of something alive. Not just a building, but a redemption. Not just for him. For both of us. One afternoon in October, I took out the will again. The original one, the one that had Carmine's name and Luca's children, and a few people who had carried me when I had nothing. I added a new name. Matthews. But not for the villa. No. For Casanuova. That was his. Earned, not inherited. I'd give him the land. The building. The name. The story. Let the villa be mine till I pass. But let the legacy be his while he still breathes. Because true legacy is not marble and windows, it's how the ones you love carry your lessons into rooms you'll never walk in. One evening, near Christmas, Matthew brought someone to dinner. She was quiet, with soft eyes and a voice that seemed carved from candlelight. "This is Anna," he said, a little shy. "She's helped me a lot." She extended her hand, not too firm, not too weak, just steady. She looked at me and said, "He told me what you built, and what he broke. I think he wants to do it right this time." I studied her, not for beauty, not for charm, for stillness, for truth. And I saw it. She wasn't like Cynthia. She didn't want the villa. She wanted the man who laid brick with his hands and regret with his heart. That night, we ate by the fire, and for the first time since Margaret died, the house felt full again. By spring, Casa Nuova had its first residents. They didn't come for comfort. They came for purpose. And Matthew gave them that. He ran workshops, hosted meals, built shelves for books and open mics for broken voices. He let the olive tree grow through the central atrium, encased in glass. Every time someone walked in, they looked up and saw its branches touching the light. Just like him. By the time Casa Nuova hosted its second spring, it had become more than a place, it was a movement. Every month, more people wrote in asking to come. Not tourists, not influencers. Just people whose lives had been cracked in ways that society didn't applaud. Former addicts, divorced mothers, veterans with too many ghosts, artists who'd been told they were too old to matter. And Matthew? He welcomed them all. He walked through the halls like a man born into service. Not the kind that bows or begs, but the kind that kneels to fix a broken tile and listens without interrupting. He had turned from the boy who once judged me for being broke into the man who now gave refuge to those even more lost than I had been. I watched from the sidelines, proud in a quiet way. I didn't need recognition. I didn't want my name painted on walls or printed on pamphlets. I had my terrace, my late wife's photo, and the peace that only comes when you've laid down the last of your grudges. Until one letter shattered it. It came one warm morning, tucked into an envelope with an Italian government seal. It was about the villa. Apparently, the Coastline Preservation Commission had flagged several properties along the cliffs. Due to increased tourism, tighter regulations were being enforced. Some villas, including mine, were under review. It was a formality. Probably nothing, the lawyer said. But I knew how this worked. When a property becomes interesting to the public, bureaucracy follows. And behind bureaucracy, wealth, influence, developers. In short, someone wanted my home. I met with a lawyer in Salerno, a tall woman with shrewd eyes and a clipped accent. She walked me through the file. "There's a committee considering repurposing certain private estates into cultural heritage guest houses," she explained. "Your villa is prime real estate. Panoramic views, historical value, perfect for a luxury conversion." I stared at her. "You mean they want to steal it and turn it into a hotel?" She didn't flinch. "They call it recontextualization." I clenched my jaw. "And how much time do I have?" 6 weeks. Unless you can prove continuous restoration or heritage exemption. And if I can't, she folded her hands. "They'll offer a compensation package. Market value. Generous on paper. Insulting in truth." I thanked her and walked out, heart heavy. The sea breeze didn't taste the same that day. I didn't tell Matthew right away. I didn't want to worry him. But that night, over dinner, I couldn't hide it. He noticed the change in my eyes. "What is it?" he asked. I passed him the letter. He read it slowly, twice, then said, "They're not taking it." I smiled, but there was no joy in it. "It's not up to me anymore. Or you. Then we'll fight." "How?" "I don't have influence. I don't even have heirs who can argue legacy." He looked me dead in the eye. "Yes, you do." I raised an eyebrow. He stood up, went to the bookshelf, pulled out the local heritage application I had once helped Casa Nuova submit for Art Center status. He held it up. We apply the same here. You've restored this place yourself, kept the original stones. You've hosted cultural events. Carmine's journals are still in the library. This isn't just a house. It's a story. I stared at him. You think that's enough? He smiled. I know it is. And then something happened I hadn't expected. He started a campaign. Not for fame, not for me, but for the house. He went door to door across the village, collected testimonies, videos, stories. He found the German couple who'd bought my first home. They still had photos of me fixing the walls with my bare hands. He spoke to children I had taught how to sand wood, now grown. They sent letters. He even found Carmine's old voice on a tape, talking about legacy and the man who had rebuilt the bones of Italy with no fanfare, just quiet hands. Then, without telling me, he submitted the entire package to the commission, with one note taped to the cover. This villa doesn't belong to history. It is history. You cannot buy that. You can only honor it. Matthew Ellison, son of the carpenter. The review committee visited in late spring. For people, suits, shoes that didn't like dirt. They walked through my home like archaeologists examining a tomb, curious, clinical, detached, until they saw the walls. Matthew had prepared a hallway, a gallery, real-life framed memories. Old photographs of me and Carmine, of the first restoration, of Margaret holding a basket of lemons, of children painting in the garden. A timeline, a witness. They stopped. The oldest of the committee, a silver-haired man with hands as wrinkled as mine, said softly in Italian, Questa non è solo una casa, è una canzone. This is not just a house. It's a song. The next day, we got the decision. Heritage exemption granted. No sale. No conversion. The villa would stay mine. Undisturbed. Unbought. I sat in the garden that afternoon, tears sliding down my face, and felt the sun warm the top of my head like a hand from heaven. That night, Matthew brought out a bottle of vintage red he'd been saving. To Margaret, he said. To Carmine, I added. We toasted. Then he said, and to you, Dad. I looked at him, at this man who had once laughed at me for failing, now standing beside me after saving the thing I built. He raised his glass higher and said, voice thick, you never needed a legacy to make people remember you. You just needed time to show them what you were made of. I laughed. Wood and stubbornness. He clinked his glass against mine. And forgiveness. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I walked down to the shoreline, barefoot, as I used to when I first arrived. The rocks were cold. The wind had a bite. But I didn't feel fragile. I felt aware of the time I had left, of the stories I carried, of the weight I was finally ready to lay down. And then I saw it. Matthew, already there, staring at the water. He turned. Couldn't sleep either? I shook my head. Old men don't sleep. We wait. For what? For the next chapter. He smiled. Then let's write it. We stood in silence. Just two men. No longer father and son. But builders. Summer rolled in with the warmth of forgiveness. The villa stood untouched, proud on the cliff's edge, its white walls glowing under golden light, as if even the sun had acknowledged its victory. But inside, I could feel something shifting, not in the stone, not in the structure, but in me. My body had started to slow in subtle, humbling ways. A stiffness in my hips, a tremor in my right hand, the breath that came shorter each time I climbed the garden path. Nothing dramatic, just whispers of the clock ticking louder. I didn't tell Matthew. Instead, I poured myself into our work. Casa Nuova had blossomed into something larger than both of us. There were waitlists now, donations, a small grant from the regional cultural ministry. The olive tree that had once broken through the old roof now stretched proudly through the glass atrium, its branches hosting lanterns at night that swayed like stars caught mid-fall. But what mattered most wasn't the house. It was the people. Giovanni, the blind violinist, had started teaching music again. Amira, the Syrian chef, opened a small food cart in the square. Miriam, the young artist with panic attacks, painted a mural on the back wall of the property, one that showed a man kneeling in a pile of rubble, building a staircase with broken bricks. When I asked her what it meant, she said simply, starting over. One evening, as the cicadas sang outside and the wine sat untouched in our glasses, I looked across the table at Matthew and asked the question I'd never dared before. Why didn't you visit after your mother died? He blinked, caught off guard. We'd never spoken of it directly. I was afraid, he admitted. I didn't know how to be around you without her. You two were always a team, I finished. He nodded. I thought you'd look at me and see everything she left behind. I swallowed hard. I did, I said softly, but not in the way you think. He looked up. I saw her in your walk, in your temper, in the way you overthink when you're scared. And it broke me, because I was still grieving her, but it also healed me, because part of her lived on. We were quiet for a long time. Then he whispered, I missed you. I missed you too. That night, I dreamt of Margaret. She stood in the old garden, hair tied back in her favorite yellow scarf, the lemon trees swaying behind her. She smiled not with longing, but with peace. You finally forgave him, she said. I finally forgave myself, I answered. She nodded. Then you're ready. When I woke, I knew it was time. A few days later, I sat with my lawyer and updated the final clause in my will. The villa would remain protected under heritage law, never to be sold or divided. But Casa Nuova? It would pass to Matthew entirely, with one condition. He must never forget what it was built from. Not just wood and stone, but from shame, rebuilt into pride. From distance, reforged into closeness. He must give what I gave a second chance. By late September, I began preparing to leave, not in sadness, not with regret, but with intention. I packed my life slowly, quietly, not to erase it, but to pass it on. Matthew helped. At first, he resisted. You don't have to go anywhere, he said. I'm not dying, I replied. I'm just relocating. He frowned. To where? To a small apartment in the village. Closer to the square. Closer to the bakery. Less stairs. He shook his head, laughing through his concern. You're ridiculous. I'm practical, I corrected. I want you to have the villa now. Use it to host new artists. Let Casa Nuova grow beyond that one olive tree. And finally, he understood. I was not giving up. I was giving over. There's a difference. The day I moved, the entire town came out. Luca brought wine. Amira brought baklava. Even little Chiara, the one who once called me Nano Harold, handed me a card with a crayon drawing of a man holding a hammer and a heart. You built things, she said, even when they were broken. I nearly wept. Matthew carried the last box out. When he returned, I found him standing in the garden, alone, staring at the stone wall I'd repaired a decade ago. He turned when he heard my steps. Do you ever wonder, he said, what would have happened if I hadn't laughed that day? If I'd just let you sleep on my couch? I stepped beside him. No, I said, because that version of you would have never built this. He looked down. I think about her a lot, he murmured. Mom. So do I replied. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He unrolled Ida a tiny chisel. I found this in one of your toolboxes. It had her initials on it. I smiled. She used to help me carve the details into the bed frames. Said smooth corners were acts of mercy. He looked at the tool, then at the house. Then I'll keep building mercy, he said. And I nodded. Because that was the legacy. Now I am an old man in a smaller home, with fewer stairs, and mornings that begin with slow coffee and soft jazz on the radio. But every Thursday, I walk past Casa Nuova. The olive tree still stands. The windows glow with light. Voices drift out, some laughing, some singing, some whispering stories they've never dared to share before. And sometimes, I see Matthew standing under the archway, holding the door open, just like I once did. He doesn't just run the place. He tends it, like a garden that once grew from ash. I don't know how much longer I have, but I don't fear the end, because I've lived long enough to see a broken man rebuild his life. Not just once, but twice. And I've seen my son do the same. And I know when my heart finally stops, when the last nail has been hammered, and the last wall painted, there will be people walking through halls I once touched, feeling peace because someone once believed they still had a story worth living. And maybe, just maybe, they'll sit under that olive tree, look up, and whisper, he built this. From nothing. And someone will answer, no, he built it from love.